Has Sony effectively run the largest movement perception test ever done? Is the conclusion really this pessimistic? Since the PS5 Pro came out, VRR has been broken on the console in the vast majority of games. Outside of documenting this issue yourselves, there is shockingly little discussion on the internet around this. When I think about all of the minor video game stories that blow up in comment frenzies across the internet, this VRR issue doesn't rate. Puddlegate from Marvel's Spider-Man has carried more weight on the internet than VRR being broken on the PS5 for more than 6 months. Truly, it seems video game players do not care about stuttering. Thoughts? Yeah, interesting thoughts. Mine being that I do think that VRR is probably still a minority of the user base. I do think most people are probably on fixed refresh rate displays. It's probably my thought on that. And then it's basically the fact that the issue doesn't really manifest for 20 odd minutes. 20 odd minutes seems to be pretty normal play for the most part. But then it does kick in, and then it does kick in only on certain games, as far as we've been able to tell. So, Oliver, you took point on our coverage on this. Is this the largest movement perception test ever done? And is the conclusion really this pessimistic?
I'm certainly relatively keen on the idea that most people are not noticing some stuttering issues in games and in general performance issues in games. That's been my experience, that some of the things that we complain about are not often perceived by the general gaming audience. But I really, in this case, I actually don't think that's what's going on necessarily, because VRR is only broken typically on PS5 consoles, on PS5 Pro consoles in very certain circumstances. It's really games with unlocked frame rates running for extended periods. And if you have VRR turned on in the system settings, either turned on only on games that explicitly support VRR or turned on and enabled for all games in the system, if you have it enabled just to smooth out the occasional dip, it doesn't seem to emerge over any reasonable span of time. So the vast majority of games running by default, running with some FPS cap, should be fine. And even then, it's not every game with an unlocked frame rate. Of the games I tested, the split between games that definitely had issues and games that were definitely fine, not counting the ones that were a little bit ambiguous, that was like a 60-40, 70-30 split. So probably a majority of games, but not an overwhelming majority of games necessarily. So this, to me, it's an issue affecting the minority of users that have VR enabled in the first place, right? That's people with VR enabled, with VR capable panels that also have VRR turned on, maybe to apply to all games or just to some games. And even among that minority, it's only affecting people who play games that run unlocked and choose to go into those modes, generally speaking, because outside of a few titles like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, most titles are not kicking you into an unlocked display mode by default. They're letting you play at 60 FPS or 30 FPS or 40 FPS without an unlocked frame rate. And then even amongst those games, again, we're getting to a vanishingly small amount of the game playing hours on PlayStation, I'm sure. The Last of Us is affected, but God of War isn't. Why? I have no idea, but it isn't, right? So, your particular game of choice, your particular poison there may not be affected in such a bad way, but still, I'm hoping Sony does fix it. They should fix it. But it is an issue. I don't want to downplay it, obviously. People are upset, rightfully so, but I also think this is just the kind of thing that's only going to affect a limited pool of player bases with a certain preference for unlocked frame rates. Generally, that's what's going on. With those players that you might have this issue, most players will not run into this issue in their typical play on PS5 software.
John, I think actually the largest movement perception test ever done is probably the PC gaming audience. Some of the stuff we've seen, which, which sort of brought about the whole hashtag runs fine on my PC counterpoint, which is like, you're talking rubbish, Digital Foundry, even though you've got, empirical data here showing an issue. That doesn't bother me, runs fine on my PC. But curious what you think about this.
I think it just doesn't register with everyone, right? Or even if it does, it doesn't bother them. They just think like, oh, little blip, and it doesn't, they don't think about it after that. And that's fine. But, to a point, I think people are able to overlook that. And it's been variable in so many ways across the PC. Do you remember SLI?
Right.
Before the whole idea of frame
AFR.
time was really in the discussion. you know, people always used to call it micro stutter, but a lot of people didn't really notice or care about it. And like an entire generation was sold these cards for your power user that had this problem, like basically inherent to it. And a lot of users didn't seem to care or notice. So, yeah, I really think it is. If it bothers you, it's going to be very annoying, but I think it's as with anything, a lot of people don't notice these things. It's the same to some degree with things like frame rate in general, you know, all this stuff. It's motion clarity. Obviously, I'm very sensitive to that. Most people don't seem to be all that bothered by flat panel motion clarity, right? Or even things like black levels. When flat panels became big, you know, everybody was excited about going flat, and CRTs were discarded quickly, even though they had major advantages still. But people didn't notice or care. A large subset, or like the majority even, didn't seem to notice or care. So it's like, it really is just drilling down into this minority of opinion, the people that are sensitive to these things, that it becomes an issue. So even though we might be sitting here being like, how do you not notice this? This is horrible. Yeah, you know, most people don't care. It just occurred to me, another great one, Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U.
Oh, that's horrible.
The 59 FPS issue, where like every so many frames you get a blip, right? That drove me nuts. It's inherent in the game. It's always like that. Do you think most people notice that? I would say no. People said we were crazy. Like, what are you even talking about? It's only 59 FPS. LOL. You guys are dumb. But when you actually look at it, if you can see it, if it bothers you, it's like a constant tick. It's like always there. It's really bad. So
yeah, fixed on Switch, of course, as well.
Fixed on Switch, yes.
Yeah, I think the final point to the question from the shadow map here is that Puddlegate from Marvel's Spider-Man was such that you could just produce a two screenshot comparison that showed obvious differences. And that's much more of a communicable thing to do, as opposed to showing hitching and stuttering in a 120 hertz video feed, which you wouldn't have a 120 hertz video feed anyway. But yeah, that was part of the issue. It wasn't so easy to actually demonstrate to users, and it's far more impactful in person, obviously.